Hello and welcome to this lecture. And in this lecture, we will simply create a basic homepage of our application, which is the photo app right over here. So first of all, what we need to do is that we need to understand how you could go ahead and create something that can be actually displayed to the user. So as I earlier mentioned, this particular views.py file is actually responsible for representing some sort of data to the user. So whatever we want to display to the user, we actually need to go ahead and create a particular view in this particular file. So here, what we will do is that we will go ahead and design a simple view, which is going to be the index view, which is actually going to be the homepage of our application, and we will learn how exactly to do that. So first of all, we need to understand how the entire application is going to work. So let's take an example of a simple website. So when you actually go ahead and pass in a URL to a particular website, what usually happens is that that URL actually is sent from your particular web browser to the web server. And when that particular URL is received as a request from the web browser, to the web server is going to serve you a web page. So exactly the same thing is going to happen over here as well. So first of all, what we will do is that we will design a view, and then we will find out a way to kind of deliver that particular view to this particular web browser which we have. So let's go ahead and create a view first. So first of all, what we need to do is that we need to go ahead and import HTTP response. So this response is nothing but it's actually a response given by your server. So let's actually go ahead and import that. So that's going to be Django.http. So we need to import HTTP response from Django.http. So from Django.http, we need to import the HTTP response. Okay, so once we have imported the HTTP response, we are basically good to go. So now let's go ahead and start creating the index view right here. So what we have to do here is that for every view, we need to create a function which is going to be a Python function. So we type in def, and as this function is going to be for the index page, we will name this function as index. So when you have this particular index function, you actually need to pass in the request to this particular web page. So it's actually going to receive a request, and depending upon that particular request, it's actually going to return the response. So we'll type in request over here. So once it gets the request, it needs to return the HTTP response. So we'll type in return over here, and it's going to return the HTTP response. And this HTTP response is nothing but it's actually going to contain the actual HTML code which this view is going to return the response as. So let's say we want to return some HTML like a heading tag. So we will type in H over here, the H opening tag, and let's type in the H closing tag. And within this tag, let's type in some text like, let's say, this is the home page. Okay, so as you could see, we are done defining our view over here. So this thing right here is our view. We have named our view as index, and this view is going to receive a request from the web browser, and then it's actually going to return the response, which is this particular HTML right here. Okay, so now once we have defined the view, we now need to figure out how we could actually retrieve this particular view. So in case of any website, if you have to go to a particular page, you actually enter some kind of a special URL. So here as well, for this particular view, we need to configure a URL. So in order to configure a URL, first we need to understand the What this urls.py file does is that it basically takes that particular URL and it sends it to an appropriate view. So what we have to do here, as we have this view, we need to associate a URL for this particular view. So now in order to do that, what we will do is that we will jump onto the urls.py file of this particular page of this particular app. So now we have two urls.py files and you need to be careful while handling them. Now you need to actually go into the urls.py file for the photo app, which is this file right here. Let's actually delete everything from here. And what we will do here is that we will specify a URL pattern. So a URL pattern is nothing but it's actually a pattern which, when matches up with the entered URL, is actually going to redirect you to a particular view. So for now, we'll actually go ahead redirected this particular urls.py file. So let's say you actually want to go to the home page. If you type in this slash photos. So right now, if you type this thing in, as you could see, as the server is not running, it's not going to display you anything. But first of all, we need to configure that path, and henceforth what we will do is that we will go into this urls.py file and we will configure this path, which is nothing but the root slash photos. So we'll go here and we will create another path in this file. So that's going to be path, and that's actually going to be nothing but photos slash. And what we want to instruct this particular file is that when it encounters this particular path, he needs to be redirected to the view, which is this view right here. But we have defined this view into the urls.py file of photo app, and henceforth we will actually mention that it needs to include the photo app.urls file. So we'll type in photo app.urls over here and make sure to have the comma at the end. And let me now tell you how exactly this thing is going to work. So when you go to this particular path, what is going to happen is that this URL is going to be passed to the main urls.py file over here, which is this file right here. So now once this URL pattern encounters that particular pattern, which is photo slash, it's going to say that we need to include the photo app.urls. Then it's actually going to go to the photo app.urls file, which is this file right here. Then it's going is actually in the urls.py file over here. So what you could simply do is that you could type in from photo app import views. Okay, so once we do that, hopefully everything should work fine, and as you could see, now the application is up and running. So now let's go to this particular URL. So when we go over here and paste this URL, as you could see, you are going to get an error, and it's going to say either you visit this particular URL or this particular URL. So now if we actually request the URL, which is photos, and hit enter, as you could see, we get the response as this is the home page. And the way it works is that when we enter that particular URL, this file, which is the main urls.py file, is going to match up this particular path with this, and it says we need to include photoapp.urls. That means it's going to go to this particular file. It's actually going to find the path here, and for this path we have a view which is the index view right here. So now it's actually going to jump onto the views.py file, and it's going to find this particular index right here. And when it encounters this index, it's simply going to execute this function, and henceforth we get the HTTP response as this is the home page on our home page. So that's it for this lecture. Hopefully you guys were able to understand how to create views. So thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Thank you.